And welcome to the Eye on the Illini postgame show. This is Mike Kegley here with Kedrick. We've got was a tough first half. Actually, kind of redeemed themselves a little bit in the second half. Your thoughts about this game?
Well, they redeemed themselves on defense in the second half. I'll be specific, and I hope it was the defense and not Oregon. Trying not to show Michigan anything. I don't know which one it was. We talked a little bit at halftime. I still have the same feelings, and I guess if there was anything I want to magnify, I play sports, I coach sports, and I'm just Luke was just not good today. It is what it is, and he was not great. He deserves to have a bad game, and it wouldn't have made a difference if he was great. But some of the passes that he makes, Mike, I mean, the score is 35-9 or 38-9. Would have been more respectful if they could have put up 20, 21 points on the board. And I just think Luke had a bad game.
Well, I was frustrated on that fourth down play that he ended up throwing, I don't know, 2-3 yards short for a first down, on that fourth down play. I was frustrated because there were guys out in a pattern and there were 3 or 4 guys. None of them were past the sticks. And it was like, okay, so he had 3 guys he could throw to on that side of the field, none of which was going to get a first down. And I don't know what Luke is supposed to do in that situation other than avoid getting killed. But I thought that was kind of a emblematic of a tough week for the Illini.
Well, Mike, not only that, but let's go back. In the second half, there were so many receivers that were open, a 2-point conversion. He just missed. But he was running for his life, which he's done all season. But when they show the replays, there were guys that were open that he zeroed in on one guy and he missed. But I think part of it is for the last 2 weeks, I've heard a lot of rumblings about him holding on to the ball so long because of the offensive line. And that could be some of the reasons why he was missing receivers, because he did get rid of it a little bit quicker than what he normally had. So I'm not making an excuse for him because it still wasn't great. For his standards, for him to throw 2 picks in a game, just throw the ball up. Again, we haven't seen that since last year. But that's just a small piece of the pie. They have a lot of issues to deal with, and Oregon is Oregon, and they're at the top of the Big Ten for a reason, and you can still go 10-2. That was the thing that people were still saying, and that's still possible.
Yeah, and look, I think one of the things that I hear all the time that drives me crazy is somebody who is, we at Illini guys are credentialed media. And I do get really frustrated by people that every week their team loses. It's because their team sucked or their team didn't do this. And I think at some point you do have to tip your hat to Oregon. I thought they played an excellent game. They had killer instinct. They had speed at every position. And we talked about it when you make an investment of $20 million for your football team at the college level, you expect that team to be damn good. And I have to be honest, this is a damn good team. The Illinois doesn't have $20 million to spend at this point in time. And I thought that the year after year successes that Oregon has had on the recruiting trail, and I'm not saying it all has to do with money. They've got a heck of a program. They've got a tradition now over the last 30 years. They've got a cool facilities and just a fantastic place for a person to play football at. But those cumulative wins over the last 4 years, recruitment in and out, I thought that they really made a difference, and we saw that on the football field today.
Mike, you and I would be homers if we didn't tell the truth. Oregon is just a better football team talent-wise. There's 11 guys on the field. If Oregon has 11 5-stars, Illinois has 4. That's a huge difference in talent-wise. And that's not to knock any specific player. It makes a difference. The speed, we've seen guys that on Illinois, like we know how good Pat Bryant is. We know how good Franklin is. And we know how good Josh has been. they got when they caught the ball, they couldn't get away, and they were tackled immediately. That is just speed of the game, and and that is talent. And Illinois is not far off. Granted, it was 38-9. And I would have thought, I don't want to harp on Luke again. After being playing at Penn State, he wouldn't be, he wouldn't show some of his frustration. But I will say this: talent wise, Oregon's better than Penn State, and I think Penn State's pretty good. It's going to take a really special team for somebody to beat Oregon, and I'm not just talking in the Big Ten; I'm talking nationally. So, but from a talent standpoint, Mike, we have to be honest and just say it is what it is. And Illinois is not far off. They're going to recruit. They're still recruiting, and they are now, because they are winning. They're 6-2. They're able to go out and sell, to some of the better recruits in the country. And not that, I don't want to say 2 stars, because that's kind of nitpicking a little bit, because our best receiver is Pat Bryant, and he was a 3-star in high school. So, but you need more guys like that, guys that were underrated.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that I really saw is when it comes to recruiting, Illinois wants to put, and Brett Bielema's talked about this. He wants to get the best players out of the state of Illinois, and that is something that it takes time to do, and you want to get more difference makers. And what we saw today is a team that has a few difference makers going up against a team that has multiple difference makers,
Well
and
said.
many times, they might have 5 or 6 difference makers for Dylan Gabriel to choose which one he's going to throw to, and so I think that's a real challenge for the Illini. And I also thought, as I was looking at scores across the Big Ten, next week's game, I'm not saying that Minnesota's a great team, but they're a good team, and they rolled over Maryland this week. And I think that makes a difference, because Illinois will be facing a team that has a lot of confidence, and that's largely, they went out and won 48-23, and they kept the pressure on and didn't ease up for their chance to, when they could have made things a lot easier on Maryland, and they kept pushing pretty hard.
That's one thing Illinois doesn't do for me. They don't try to put teams away. They don't blow people out. And I'm gonna tell you, Minnesota's hungry, because last year when they had the game won, and Paddock came back in the second half and he won the game. Beelam has been very successful against them. I've not heard the status of Pat Bryant yet, but you're going to need a full team to beat them. Right now, Illinois is still 6-2, and teams want to beat them. If Illinois wants to play in a better bowl game, which is more money, you better continue to win. They're not going to sit and harp on this. There's nothing that you can do about it. I know the coaches aren't stupid. They're never going to sit and say to us, "Yeah, we're outmanned at this position." But this gives them something to look at, and knowing what they need to do to move forward. And you mentioned earlier about some of the donors being out there, and Josh, this is a picture, a picture in a picture of what you need to do to compete. And again, they're not far off, Mike. I know it was ugly, but they're not far off.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. When we look at what was going on, Illinois ended up with 293 yards, so they ended up with a better day than what maybe people thought they might have at the time. Um, what did you think about Khalil Valentine out there, and some of his contributions as a freshman on the big stage, playing against probably the best team Illinois played this year?
Well, one, he's been pretty solid all year. I mean, he's been really good for Illinois. He gives them a different look, that kind of quick back, if you will. If you look at Aiden, I don't think Aiden played, but bad either. I mean, he was 12, had 12 attempts for 69 yards. I want to revert back to something you said, that you talked about Illinois having 293 yards. Mike, they gave up 527 though, and that's a concern. Even though they only gave up 3 points the second half, I believe that is a concern for me. Um, the other thing is, going back to the running back game, I don't, with the offensive line, Mike, the way it is, it wouldn't matter if Cade Fagan is back there, Valentine, say Aiden was really good. The issue for me is the offensive line has not been great. I think if I remember right, Luke Altmaier has been sacked probably more than any. I know he's been sacked more than any quarterback in the Big Ten. That's not good, and that could be another reason why Luke may have struggled today because he didn't want to get hit because he has been sacked. We talked about it amongst ourselves as a staff how many times he's been hit.
Yeah, I agree totally. And this is something that I think they've got to work on is getting that offensive line play better. I thought that again, second half they played a little bit better, but of course you had Altmaier scrambling for his life during most of this and didn't have a lot going his direction. I thought Zachary Franklin had pretty good game, and Pat Bryant, was I think they were starting to look to him a little bit, and then boy, that hit, which I don't know, targeting it, but like I said, the guy threw that additional arm up at him, which I don't know if that would have done any more or less, but
But
it
that's
made it look bad.
intentional. If you could say the hit, Mike, but throwing the arm up,
Yep.
it added it. And so that's, to be honest with you, when I saw the call, I thought the arm was going to be the reason to begin with, because yes, your momentum is going. But when he kind of threw his arm up, I thought there's no way. But then I know the officials are probably thinking, I'm not even going to go there and say that. I'll be professional. However, I just surprised and I hope he's not concussed to where he can't play next week. They're really, really going to need him. It was a big, big day for Zakari. He had 72 yards, and I think they missed him a couple times. I think they need to go to him a little bit more. He has good hands, and but again, it was a cheap shot to me. I know the Oregon fans don't want to hear that. No fan does, but in reality, I was surprised that they didn't call it. I think a lot of people were.
Yeah, I was a little bit surprised as well, but again, you're at the point where one team's winning, and they're the they're the team that's going to get more of the calls when you win. That's just the way sports goes. You and I have been on both sides of that, depending on where we're coaching, and it was tough. I really felt like um, overall, I thought that the Illini did a decent job in the second half. I also thought that the concerning thing for me was I don't like to see a rushing game. When you give up over 200 yards, that is just something that on the ground that just kind of scares me a bit. And Minnesota is going to do their best to move the ball on the ground. They don't have a greatest passing attack in the world, so fans had better be prepared to watch PJ Fleck try to run the ball against the Illini.
Well, I can tell you this, Mike. They're 6-2. Nothing is going to change with this roster right now. There's nobody coming in to fix the problem. That I don't know the saying with the pig with the lipstick, but it's going to be what it's going to be because, teams are going to run the ball. Illinois is one of the worst defensive teams in the conference in stopping the run. They've done a pretty good job of stopping the pass. If I'm coaching against them, I'm going to run the ball 80% of the time. I just would. If they stack the box, I mean, teams are still able to get first downs against them and chew up the clock. So I agree. I think Minnesota's going to do that. It's a recipe, something that they have to fix. The line play, when we talked early in the season when we were doing our prediction, we thought the offensive line would be great. We thought the defensive line would be concerns. But you talk about money, being well spent. That is huge because I know Luke would never say publicly about how many times he's been hit, but I know in the back of his mind he's thinking because if he's not rushing, he's running out to his right. He's been hit so many times where you have to get better for the position. And quite frankly, Minnesota's big and they're going to open up holes and they have to try to figure out a way to slow them down.
Yeah, I think that's true. I know the defensive backs gave up. The defense, didn't they gave up a lot of yards. Um, I thought they played markedly better in the second half. I thought the tackling was better because again, missed tackles really hurt them in the first half. I thought it was a little bit better in the second half. And I thought they did get into a situation where I thought they baited Gabriel into an interception, very similar to what they did to Jalen Daniels earlier in the season.
Yeah, they did. They stepped up. Like I said, I mean, if you want to, put a crown on a prince's head, they gave up 3 points the second half. I mean, regardless of how you look at it, and they did start their starters and at the beginning of the third quarter. It just stinks that it took so long um, for them to figure it out. I knew once they got down 21 points, 24 points, whatever, I knew it was over because they don't. Their offense isn't designed for that. Because when you look a couple times, Luke would just run back. There was just guys running down the field just trying to beat their man. No imagination to the offense. That's not good. That's why I said that's not Illinois' offense, and I don't know if they don't like to do that with Luke. Maybe the receivers aren't. They have good hands. Franklin and Brian have great hands, but there has to be a reason why they don't do more of that. I saw them throw the ball down the field more today than they have all season.
Yeah, yeah. And any other thoughts that come to mind based on what we saw with tonight's game?
You have to. I'm going to pull a coach speak here, and Coach Milo. They would have won. You celebrate tonight, and you put it to bed, and you move on to Minnesota. There was nothing to me good about this. I don't care the fact that they scored 9 points. I don't care, about a few statistics. Yes, we can say, Aiden has 69 yards. We can say Franklin has 72 yards. They should. Getting beat 38-9 when you're the number 20 team in the country, at least put up 14, 24 points, 17 points. That's my one thing. Like, if I have to take it away from it. But they'll be battle tested. They play 4 ranked teams. There's nobody else on their schedule that they should not be favored against.
Yeah, I think in the end that, but they've got to come through now. This is probably where people are most, maybe I guess nervous would be the best way to say it, in regards to what's going to happen here in the future, as Illinois is really going to. We go back to 7-1, ending up 8-4 a few years ago. Illinois going down the stretch will face Minnesota at home. Then they face Michigan State at home, travel to Rutgers, and then play Northwestern. I believe that's the Wrigley Field game. So they've got 4 games. Folks, you got to remember, in the Big Ten, there are no gimmies anymore. But Illinois will be favored in each one. It's a tough road to hoe for the expectations of the Illini. They're now 6-2. I will be very frank with you. I predicted they would be 6-6 as their overall record. So they're playing with house money right now. But I also, with the 6 games this early in the season being won, my expectations have won up, and I would like to see a 9 or 10 game winning. At the end of the year. That's not going to be easy. They'll have to deal with injuries. We saw some bumps and bruises today, and as you mentioned, hopefully Pat Bryant will be okay. We got Matt Stevens out in Oregon who is digging into that even as we're talking on this podcast. We hope to have some information later this evening, but certainly it's something worth keeping an eye on. And then after that, I think they've got to come through. Ked, what are your expectations now for this team when it comes to wins?
Honestly, when I mentioned 10-2, that's just because I've heard other media guys talk about it. Realistically, the way the season is right now today, they win 8 games. I'm fine with that. I really am. You win 8 games. This is not an okay season. It's a really good season. I've always said Illinois is good enough to win 6, 7, 8 games, 9 games a year, all the time. They should always be competitive to go to a bowl game. Being 10-2, yes, we're going to be spoiled. But Mike, those teams that are left on that schedule, Minnesota, Rutgers, Northwestern, I don't know who the other, and Michigan State, those teams are hungry too. Those teams are going to be fighting. Coaches are fighting, for their jobs. Illinois is bowl eligible right now, and You don't want typically every team slips up and loses a game that that they shouldn't, unless you're one of the top teams in the country. I'm not saying Illinois is going to do that, but 8 wins would be great. Then you get to a bowl game. I think if they win 8 games, they could possibly play a good team from the SEC, and I think that'll be good. I think they'll be playing on January 1st or something like that instead of somewhere cold. I don't know if New York has a bowl or Detroit, but nobody wants to be sitting outside in the snow, around Thanksgiving or Christmas time, so holidays. So my thing is 8 wins would be great.
Yeah, and I will say that, this is a team that's gonna need to prove it, and they may have to go a week or 2 without Pat Bryant, depending on what happens. Like I said, stay tuned to Illini guys. Matt Stevens is working on it, and I'm not certain that they're gonna have a definitive, answer tonight, but there is a possibility they will. But, anytime a player goes out of the game with a head injury, you automatically, just start wondering if the next week is at risk. That's just the way it is, and it's different from our youth when, if you could tell them what day it was, they'd throw you right back in the game. It didn't matter what else was going on. Um, and one of the things I think is interesting is with with Luke Altmaier, we'll get to see. I thought this year he's demonstrated during games the ability to bounce back, and he's had tough plays and then came back and was fine. Now he's had a rough game, and I want to be clear. I'm not saying that Illinois lost because of Luke Altmaier, but he did have a rough game, and now we're going to see, can he bounce back, and how is his mental health, so to speak, when he goes out against the Golden Gophers come Saturday, and that game time is yet to be determined. The Big Ten will probably announce that, I believe, on Monday.
Mike, the best thing for Luke Altmaier is to get a couple bags of ice. They'll put this game to bed and look at game film. He needs to look at film to get better. See the mistakes, or be told the mistakes that he made, and get better. I mean, because he's been one of the better quarterbacks in all of college football. He had a rough day today. Actually, like we said, that happens. It's going to happen to a lot of players. And his confidence right now has been sky high. You can see some of the frustrations on his face today. He goes as the team goes. I mean, they really need him. He's an important part of the offense, and I think when he takes a look at if he does look at some of those plays, I don't want to contradict myself and say put it to bed, then you look at it, but just throwing the ball down the field, he hasn't done that since last year, and I know he knows better than that, and I know the coach will talk to him about that.
Yeah, and as guys who've coached before, I gotta wonder if when they play Minnesota, the one positive coming out of this is it'll be like the game slows down a little bit for the Illini, because I do think there was an adjustment. I don't care what anybody says, there is a differentiation in speed with Oregon and Ohio State and the rest of the Big Ten. And I'm not trying to knock Penn State, because Penn State is an excellent football team. They are big, they are strong, and they've got a couple fast guys. But I'm not certain if even Penn State has speed across the board like Oregon. And I think it took the Illini a little bit of time to adjust to that. You saw several guys who are good tacklers take bad pursuit angles
Yes.
on things in the first half, and I think it was just because they thought I can catch that guy, and then all of a sudden they ran to a point, and that's when you find out that they're going this way, and you think I'm going to meet them right here, and all of a sudden you can't catch up to them, and it's like, they're a little. I need to take a steeper angle here. And I think it took them some time to adjust to that. What are your thoughts? I know this is something that you can see it sometimes a little easier in basketball, but I thought that it did take them some time to adjust to that, and I do think that maybe that'll be a benefit next Saturday.
I think I think Oregon is the fastest team in the conference. They are. I mean, I think they're faster than Ohio State. I will say Penn State's fast. I even think Michigan is. Michigan just doesn't have an offense. If you think about it, Mike, Illinois only scored 21 points against Michigan. 7 of those, they had to set up a fake field goal, a fake punt to get themselves in position to score. That tells you how good the talent level has to be. Those four teams to me just they're above everybody else. I mean, I know Washington was great last year, but they lost a lot. But yes, and when you talk about over pursuit, I thought there were a couple times. I mean, I truly feel bad for saying this. I think a couple players at Illinois knew that they couldn't catch. They took horrible angles because typically, against a team like Minnesota or Purdue, they would have been able to make those tackles. They didn't do that today. I think they were taking different angles because they were trying to knock the speed off and keep them in front of them. Because if you miss a tackle with this group, they're going to get an extra 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 yards.
Yeah, well, yeah, or if not even more, it was scary. Now, Brett Bielema, took ownership for the first half in particular. He said that they just didn't have the right things dialed up. Um, Defensively, Aaron Henry's in hot water, not in hot water, all that stuff with the fans. But overall, I think that was probably the nightmare scenario. I've felt like this defense has played a little bit with smoke and mirrors over this year. I think they still are awfully thin at defensive line, and they've been able to play better than to be honest, what I would have anticipated in multiple games. And I thought this was the first game that they just didn't have any answers, and Oregon was also disciplined enough that they took advantage of it.
I think people need to realize. I mean, to get off the whole Aaron Henry situation, because you can't say he's great one week and then the next week he's not. Let's look at it this way. Oregon's good, but I'm looking at the stats for the Ohio State Oregon game when it was 32-31. Oregon gave up 467 yards to Ohio State, and in that game, Oregon had 496 yards. So I get it, So you can't have it both ways. You can't be good one week and then the next week you're not, And you look at the game, Ohio State threw for 326 yards and Oregon threw for 341 yards. Yes, Illinois gave up, what was it? I believe 527 yards. But like I just said to you, Ohio State put up 467 and Oregon put up 496. Illinois is not far off. And that's against, at the time, I believe Ohio State, I don't know what they were ranked, but they're one of the top teams in the country. So I'm not going to sit and throw Aaron Henry on their bus because of what happened today when I just gave you the statistics of how well Ohio State did against them and what they did to Ohio State.
Yeah, and you throw in, like, even today we saw a Nebraska team that Illinois beat by a touchdown take Ohio State all the way to the last minute and a half of the game before falling, 21-17. So that you start playing that three-way game, it gets all crazy trying to figure out, well, they played this team close and that team not. I think Illinois can hang with almost anybody in the Big Ten, and probably the two teams that give them the most problems are right there at the top with Oregon and Ohio State. And they would have that in common with the rest of the Big Ten as well. Any final thoughts on the game as we kind of close this off?
Well, Mike, yes, I'm going to look at it like this. There was a difference of 30-something yards between Ohio State and Illinois as far as points given up. I hope, and I am concerned, I'm not going to be positive about this one, about Pat Bryant, that he was hit to the head. And I've not seen a guy get hit to the head like that where they were not concussed. I just haven't. So I'm already concerned about next week. And that means that Malik or LZ or Dixon or somebody else is going to have to step up. It's going to be easier to take away Zachary Franklin because you can double him, so other guys have to step up and make plays. But if there was 1 week, I just really want to see Illinois get off the field. If I had one wish, Mike, get off the field on third downs. And from the very beginning of the game, you cannot continue to work your behind off and the team gets 3rd and 5 or 3rd and 7 and they run the ball right up the middle and throw a little slant route. They have to get off the field in those situations.
Yeah, that was probably the roughest and again in the first half when everything really counted, Oregon was 5 for 7 on third down, and they ended up with the one of the two times that they didn't get the first down to make that 5 for 7. They got 16 of 17 yards, and then that made them 1 for 1 on fourth down conversions in the half. So it was a disastrous third down. I think we have learned another lesson, which is send everybody, send the kitchen sink on a pass rush. I just don't know that in today's world, dropping guys into coverage is going to work. It worked in the 1987
Yeah.
when Penn State did that to Vinny Testaverde in Miami, but that might be the last time that it's consistently worked in a game. The guys are just too good of passers nowadays, and the route running is just too precise. And then they're all bigger, faster, stronger than they were in the past. So I'm all for, if you're going to do that, don't ask your defensive backs to cover someone for 5 to 7 seconds, but ask them to knock somebody down who's trying to throw the ball, and use the DBs or whoever you need to in a blitz situation, and see if you can cut down that time. So one last thing before we go, folks. Of course, we have IlliniGuys.com. You can subscribe there for basically 27 cents a day. It's an annual subscription. The key thing to remember is there is a message board. So if you go ahead and join our thing, you get all of our stories. You don't have any blocks on that. Everything that's back there recruiting wise, you get. But the most important thing is the message boards, folks. That is where, when Ked or Brad hears something and we can't get two sources, so we can't do a story about it, we can say, here's what we're hearing. That stays back in the message boards, and that's what keeps people going. Hey, I understand that everything is. I understand that we might get somebody committing. Those type of things. We told people that Ivisic might be playing on Sunday, and that was actually Ked who was the first person to kind of get a hold of that, and we let people know about that. Those are the type of things that you get being a subscriber. And then the other thing is, and this is the other part that makes it really, really cool, is you can go ahead and go back and forth and ask Ked or Brad or Larry or Matt or myself questions. And it's a two-way street on communication. It's not a one-way thing. So I would tell you that it was very good. It'd be very good to join, and you get a little bit more of an experiences that you want. And then I just going through some of what was going on. It was interesting. Shad Khan and the YouTube guys need to send some cash to Bielema. Well, I'm all for that. I will say that Shad Khan has been incredibly generous with the University of Illinois athletics. I do not want somebody to walk away from here thinking that Shad is the problem. If there were more people like Shad, Illinois would have a budget much closer to what Oregon has. And certainly, we saw the tweet a few weeks ago with Brett Bielema and one of the YouTube founders in the locker room, and that was something, or in the Smith Center, and that was something that I found very personally was a very huge positive for me, knowing that that was happening. And look, folks, the fact of the matter is this is a tough it's a tough competition now, because not only are you competing for the best athletes, but you're competing for the dollars, the hard-earned dollars of business people or just common people who want to donate to Icon for the Illini. Those are the type of things that's what's going to make the difference. A couple other things that came out, Elzy got injured too. Now I know he went back out and played. That doesn't mean that he's A-OK. I think there's going to be some bumps and bruises. And Brett Bielema said that he didn't think there were any serious injuries. He did kind of qualify, Pat Bryant, we got to see, but they would know more on Monday. But right now there was nothing that jumped out at him that alarmed him. So I think obviously all eyes will be on Pat. I'm not trying to knock anybody else and have any, minimize any other players there. And
Mike,
then I think,
I'm
go
not
ahead.
100% sure. I'm just reading this and I can't confirm it, but I saw something on Twitter. There was an article wrote where Bielema was upset, and I do think Bryant is concussed. I'm trying to confirm it, but I did see that, and Bielema was not happy about the comment. Excuse me, about the lack of call. So, we're going to get something on that, hopefully from Matt pretty soon, if he can confirm that. But and you're right, Elsie was also injured. So I guess we're going to start finding out for sure the status.
Yeah, and people are using, and again, we try to be more careful. We are credentialed media, so we don't throw stuff around, but we're hearing the word concussed used, and so that implies, going into the concussion protocol. We don't know for sure. But I think, again, when you're in a situation where a guy gets hit like that, and I'll be honest with you, he kind of got hit in the head 3 times, because he got hit by the first guy, hit by the second guy, and then that back of your head that hits onto the field. And so, we're hoping Pat Bryant will be fine, but there was definitely a lot of hits there, and Bielma was frustrated, and very much what we were talking about with the forearm that came through, and that was something that I don't know. To be honest with you, it looked like he was swinging for his head. I would have taken it that way as a referee, but I'm not a referee, so ultimately it's hard to know what's going through a player's mind. Maybe he was just trying to control his body as he came through, because in fairness, Bryant got hit, which changed his angle, which then made the other guy come in much more towards the head. But boy, it looked like a forearm at the very end of everything, and I probably would have thrown the white flag or the yellow flag based on that.
Well,
Cat,
here's the
any
comment. Yeah, here's a comment that was made, Mike. This was after the game. The play where he got knocked out there, I've never seen a guy get a concussion from non-targeting. So we'll have a great conversation about that. I guess is what Bielema said after the game. So he is definitely going to have a conversation. And what the Big Ten will probably do, like it happens at least once a year to Illinois, they'll apologize, but nothing happens.
Yeah, and look, the bottom line is it's a violent sport, and now Illinois has to move on, and they've got a Minnesota team, I believe, that's 5-3, who destroyed Maryland, who at the start of the year people had high expectations for, and they have totally poopied their pants, so to speak, and so they've had a rough year. And Illinois they aren't going to be playing somebody of this caliber, but they're going to have their stuff together and be focused on Minnesota and not worried about what happened here against Oregon. So it'll be easier for the fans to dissect this and get frustrated about it. But as opposed to other people, as opposed to other people who are having those issues, the players don't have the time to get stuck and think about what's going on, and mull over the past, because they've literally got a flight back to Illinois, get rest and rehab and get their body well, and then they're going to be looking at a scouting report on Minnesota. So they aren't going to have the same time to you know stew in their juices the way fans are. Ked, any thoughts on that?
No, they're not. They're getting paid the big bucks to win games, and it's better make sure that his voices, his concerns are dealt with, and then he'll move on. I think they'll be prepared for Minnesota. I really do. I just hope health wise, that is huge. I mean that they get healthy enough, and I don't care if it's 1 point or 19 points. Get the win. Put this to bed, just like they did against Penn State, and move on because they have
Ked,
lost to better good teams.
and one thing that's fair too is we've spent a lot of time talking about the wide receiver room is very talented, that guys are developing. So I'm assuming most of these players are looking at this as, hey, we love Pat, but this is an opportunity for me to step up and help the team this week. And that's probably how they're going to approach it. And again, as we close this out, I want to say one other thing. Again, we're not going to blame this all that Illinois, the coaching staff didn't do this, the players didn't do that. Yeah, everybody could have done better. There's no doubt. But this was a very good Oregon team that's ranked number one at home, that was motivated to avoid the number one curse that's happened a couple times, this year. So I look at this as Illinois was beaten, and sometimes you run into a team that's just better than you on that day, and they were better, and you got to give Oregon got to give them their flowers and say, hey, you guys won the game. And then the last thing is we know Illinois was there. They had some boosters there. Certainly, it would have been great for Illinois to upset Oregon in front of all those boosters. But the reality of the situation is, and this is what Illinois really has to deal with, is they've got to find a way to raise more dollars to compete against Oregon, Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State. That these are these huge programs that have been on top for a long time. But you know what? There's other programs like Wisconsin and Iowa that don't want to get passed up by Illinois, because there was a time when they were ahead of Illinois. Where Illinois was ahead of them, and they don't want to get caught on that trail going on the bottom side. And then you have people like Indiana that's having an incredible year this year. Nebraska's trying to do what they can, played impressive today. So this is probably the best thing in the world for people to see, for the boosters to see just what Brett Bielema is up against when he walks on the field and looks across there at some of these teams that are so well funded. And this is not a knock at anybody. Illinois has a great fan base. But the reality is if you want to make an omelet in the Big Ten, you got to break some eggs, and that's in terms of greenbacks being donated to the team. And you can ask Brad Underwood. Brad Underwood has won enough, and he has used his NIL astutely enough that he is starting to get those W's piled up, which makes it easier to donate. I think Brett Bielema is on that same path. But right now, if you're listening to this, I don't think you probably will be, but if you're a billionaire listening to this, I would highly encourage you to think really long and hard about, if you're an Illinois fan, can you reach out to Icon for the Illini and make a donation, because it really is getting into the point where those NIL dollars are critical, particularly in either A, retaining the players that you want to retain, and B, to have the opportunity to also grab those people out of the portal that would make a difference for your team this year. Where would Illinois be without a couple offensive linemen? We talk about the offensive line hasn't been as good as what people had hoped. But, if we don't have a couple tackles, this could be a really, really, really different year than what we're talking about right now. So that's where those things are so important. And I don't want to say that, Oregon had an unfair advantage, because that's the system we're in right now. But Oregon, I would rather be the coach that has $20 million to play with than the coach that's got $3 million to play with. That's just me.
Common sense, Mark. Is common sense, and it's what it is. It's the nature of the game today. You have to go out. I don't want to talk apples and oranges. Look at the men's basketball program. They have been successful. Brad plays the game. He understands it. He will go out, but a lot of that comes with winning. And I think right now, as I said at halftime, of the game today, Illinois is competitive now. And I think the people and the alumni, I think they can see that, that Brett's good enough to get this done. I do. I just think he's missing a few pieces. They can get that. And I know they can get that. And I think, if they get to a bowl game, like I said, if they win 8 or 9 games, they honestly, in my opinion, will be able to pick up better players.
Yeah, I totally agree. So all in all, a frustrating day for Illini fans, hoping for a better showing. Didn't materialize, but to me, this is now a day that we sit back and we say, okay, how are they going to bounce back? This is going to be, they've got 4 games, of which you'd like to see them go 4-0, maybe 3-1 at the least, but it's going to be tough. And they're going to probably have to play next week, potentially without Pat Bryant. And Minnesota is going to come in here very confident and very, very much in desire to beat Brett Bielema, which PJ Fleck has such a hard time doing.
Right.
So there's no gimmies in the Big Ten. It should be exciting. So with that, folks, we are going to let you go. We will be releasing this as a podcast as well. So if you got in the middle, you certainly can download that. Eye on the Illini is available at all the big major podcast distributors, as well as the Illini Guys Sports Spectacular. You can also get Big Sports Radio. Those are our two weekly 2-hour radio shows. One is Illini centric. The other is Big Ten and big college games centric. And so if you get an opportunity to do that, and then of course subscribing at IlliniGuys.com for only 27 cents a day, you get all of our stories right, a lot of them actually early, and then you get access to all the stories, and you get those message boards, and that is the critical difference. And also we'll be on with Matt Stevens in probably somewhere between an hour or two as soon as he's done interviewing coaches and players. And so we will have some opportunities there. Be looking to it because we will do this on a stream. And then we will also have that post-game analysis going on the Eye on the Illini podcast as well. And you can find a lot of our stuff on YouTube. Go to the IlliniGuys.com channel. We'd love to have you there. You can subscribe there, and you don't have to worry about tracking it down. And, of course, you can find all of us over at Twitter if you're, interested in that. We also have the opportunity to follow Ked or myself on Twitter, and so that is something that you definitely can take a couple seconds, click that in, and you'll be up to date on Illini news as well. Until later this evening, go Illini.